And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth, and a great day for a great nation where part of our great military has set sail for the Middle East again. This is the aircraft carrier USS Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, and it is accompanied by 5,000 people representing the United States Armed Services. 5,000 will sail to the Middle East, and the Theodore Roosevelt is expected to be deployed for at least 7 months. The officials at the Department of Defense, or the Department of War, if you prefer, have said the move comes as the Navy deals with the fallout from the recent deployment of the USS Abraham Lincoln. Can Theodore Roosevelt do better than Abraham Lincoln on this one? That deployment of the USS Lincoln to the region saw the ship spend more than 250 days at sea without a port call. That lengthy deployment raised concerns about the mental health of sailors, including reports of at least one going overboard, as well as reports of low supplies on the carrier. At the same time, President Donald Trump claimed the financial strength of the U.S., the epic economy will mean that the U.S. Will be moved toward a very big victory over Iran. We shall see. There's also this news from another front of war, and a very different kind of war, but also one that is wildly unnecessary and nonsensical. The Dispatch is reporting that the Trump administration is threatening to withhold police and counterterrorism funding from states and cities that won't adopt the president's preferred voting rules, including paper ballots, citizenship checks, and hand-counted audits. In other words, it's bad enough when there were people on the left who were talking about defund the police. We're now having the Trump administration take the position of, we'll defund the police in any cities that don't mandate paper ballots and hand-counted audits. Really, these are issues worth threatening people concerning public services, basic public services like police departments. There is also this news. The Iranian missile and drone strikes have inflicted multi-billion dollars in damage on U.S. intelligence and surveillance facilities across the Middle East. This exceeds any losses the country's spy agencies have previously sustained. 4 people familiar with the matter told NBC News. And then back to the issue of ballots. A coalition of roughly 24 Democratic-led states and Washington, D.C. have gotten together and filed a new lawsuit yesterday challenging the legality of Trump's executive order on mail-in ballots after the Supreme Court turned away the group's earlier case. They didn't turn away that case on substance. They turned it away on timing. But the court ruled Monday over the dissents of the 3 liberal justices that the states did not have a right to sue against Trump's order that he signed in the spring because the U.S. Postal Service hadn't finalized the rule to execute the order. The rule was published in the Federal Register on Wednesday, making it official and leading to the state's renewed effort to block it, arguing it is a federal overreach, and it clearly is. It's so obvious clear federal overreach on states' authority to carry out their own elections. For anybody who's taken a case in constitutional law at all, the idea that the elections should be supervised not by the federal government, but by the various states is unmistakable. And it's clear. And it's an issue that shouldn't even be controversial. However, Trump's order, which he issued in March, and the rule require state and local election officials to submit a list of eligible voters to the federal government before the Postal Service will send them as mail-in ballots. The rule also requires states' mail-in ballots to meet certain design requirements, including unique barcodes and an official logo. If the ballot doesn't meet the design requirements or someone's name isn't on the submitted list, or if a state refuses to provide one, the Postal Service would refuse to deliver the ballot. Now, is all this supposed to happen before the midterm elections? It's unclear. The state's lawsuit was filed yesterday, just as a federal judge in Boston lifted an earlier nationwide block on the restrictions given the Supreme Court's earlier ruling. But the new case could mean the legal challenge ends up right back at the Supreme Court. Timing is critical, as the first mail-in ballots are set to be sent out in certain states within days of the midterm elections. And there is another legal filing that is bizarre and ludicrous, but here it is. In a legal filing, the board of the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts said that the arts complex and living memorial, that's what it's called, to President John F. Kennedy may be torn down if its plans for a 2-year renovation and to add President Trump's name back on the complex. Now, that's the crucial point, of course, if that does not move forward. In other words, President Trump, through the members of the Kennedy Center board, all of whom he has appointed, he is the chairman of the board, that if they don't put Trump's name back on this building and do a full renovation, they may actually shut it down for good, destroy it, even tear it down. The board called the Kennedy Center embarrassing to the nation's capital and a sick and poorly run facility. Lawyers for the Justice Department also argued that the board and President Trump, who was named as the complex's chairman in February of 2025, right after he took over as president, should be allowed to move ahead with a 2-year renovation that would shut down most of the complex's performance venues and cost at least $250 million. What's so bizarre about this is for people who follow the world of the performing arts, the Kennedy Center was on a strong streak that was the headquarters for the National Symphony Orchestra, which is a symphony orchestra for Washington, D.C., who now have a conductor named Noseda, who has been outstanding and someone who has attracted a lot of positive attention. But now they're talking about ending the whole Kennedy Center. There are more pieces about ends and beginnings and the struggles in between, including with Canada. We will get to that and more on the Medved Show. And here on the Michael Medved Show, some depressing news. There's always some depressing news. Thank God it's not all depressing, even though sometimes it feels that way. This is from Vladimir Putin. He says he is preparing to escalate his attacks against Ukraine after concluding that further peace negotiations are pointless. That is according to Bloomberg News reports. Sources close to the Kremlin reportedly told Bloomberg that Russia could intensify its ballistic missile campaign against Kyiv and other major Ukrainian cities, and that Putin increasingly views Ukraine attacks as NATO attacks because the alliance is supplying Kyiv with most of its arsenal. Bloomberg also reported that a growing number of Russian officials now view tactical nuclear weapons as a possible last resort option if conventional escalation fails to break the stalemate. What do you imagine could happen? Or even better, what would be off the table if Putin used tactical nuclear weapons against the Ukrainian army? Now, again, the term tactical weapons means that it is aimed by definition at military targets. But how do you distinguish if you're using nuclear weapons of any kind? And what is the response then of NATO or the response of the American administration? I am shocked, frankly, that there isn't some kind of statement or warning or strong condemnation by the United States against any introduction of nuclear weapons in this conflict. It's a hideous prospect, which of course could mean mass death and killing and destruction on a scale never experienced before. I mean, because again, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, much less devastating weapons than exist today. Meanwhile, Newsweek reports that President Donald Trump's approval rating has slipped deep below water. In other words, it's way below zero. Zero means just as many people approve as disapprove. And Trump looks longingly at zero on every issue. This measured by an independent monthly tracker poll for the first time in the survey's history. While Trump pulled underwater on most issues in the tracker in February, March, and May, this is the first time his rating has fallen well below zero across the board. The erosion spans issues Republicans have traditionally owned, which suggests the president is entering the final stretch before the midterms, facing the most intense opposition of his second term so far. Trump is a net negative on all 12 issues tested in the August Strength and Numbers Verisight polling series. Net approval ratings are calculated by subtracting the percentage of people who disapprove from those who approve of the president's performance on a given issue. Border security, long his strongest issue, fell from positive 1% in July to minus 5% today, making it its worst reading yet. Trump's approval on prices dropped to minus 48%, a record low in the tracker. Overall, 37% approve and 60% disapprove of Trump's overall job performance, a net of minus 23, that is down from minus 21 in July. Strong disapproval numbers outnumber strong approval by almost 3-1. Amazing. In other words, it's not only that people disapprove, they disapprove strongly, and that 17% who approve strongly of President Trump are a lonely minority. Democrats lead the generic congressional ballot 49-41. to 43 among registered voters. This is when they ask people, are you planning to vote? Are you registered to vote? Okay, yes, you're registered to vote. You're planning to vote. Who would you vote for? The Republican candidate or a Democratic candidate? And right now, Democrats ahead 49 to 43. Now, because of reapportionment and factors like that, this doesn't necessarily mean that the Republicans are on track to being badly damaged, but it does not give them a great deal of encouragement. In fact, no encouragement for the election coming up. Meanwhile, speaking of lack of encouragement, Washington Post is reporting that a former Congressman Mike Collins' staffer posted KKK and Nazi images, and some of his fellow Republicans see a pattern. Representative Mike Collins, Republican of Georgia, is challenging Senator John Ossoff, a Democrat of Georgia. The former Collins staffer posted a swastika and shared an image of himself in what appear to be KKK robes. He also describes himself as a twink fascist. Now, I was unsure what a twink was, but the Washington Post describes a twink as a young gay male who is tall and elegant. And the aide in this issue, whose name is Preston Para, he's 24. He interned for Mike Collins for 2 months in 2024 before working as a contractor for the leadership PAC of Mike Collins later this year. Overhaul PAC, which is the PAC he worked for, paid Para $7,700 for fundraising consulting on May 25th. And the images which were found in a search by the Washington Post follow other controversial actions and rhetoric from former Collins staffers and other Collins associates that have dogged his Senate campaign. A number of people in Collins' orbit have also been accused of having ties to white nationalists or of making racist and anti-Semitic comments, and the congressman's own social media presence is drawing scrutiny. We'll get that to more and other election political news coming up. And on the Michael Medved Show, Harry Enton is the chief data analyst for CNN. And he's basically noted for extremely emotional announcements about Trump's failures in public opinion polling and his negativity in public opinion polling. And a lot of people say, well, this is just Harry Enton. He only focuses on the bad news for Trump. Okay, if you look at our last year's worth of polling for President Trump, certainly if you go back to the beginning of the war on Iran, there hasn't been much positive development on the polling front. It's just not there. But this is the warning for President Trump from Harry Enton on CNN, clip 20.
Yeah, I would just say that President Trump is losing on tariffs. He is losing on tariffs. The cost for him is great declines in popularity when it comes to tariffs. Just look at this turnaround, Johnny B. Okay, voters on Trump and tariffs. Look at this. Versus Kamala Harris. He was trusted more by 22 points over Kamala Harris. Very much in the green, very much in the positive territory. Look at this drop now. His net approval rating down through the floor. The St. Lawrence River, 30 points underwater. What is that, Johnny B? That is a 52-point switcheroo. With independence, he's 60 points underwater when it comes to her. John has the arms out like this because it's just one of these shifts that we have seen throughout the President Trump's second term, whereby the reality did not meet the perceptions or the hopes beforehand. Americans hate the tariffs, and they are taking their anger out on President Trump.
60 points underwater on tariffs?
60 points underwater on tariffs.
Okay. The idea of why that has happened, well, among other things, it's because the hostility behind the president's angry threats to use tariffs to crush our rivals and our enemies have now been applied most visibly and most controversially to our best friend. Most Americans do not have negative views toward Canada. I mean, I know there's a song, Blame Canada, that they're steely little eyes, beady little eyes, is it? Whatever it was, it's South Park, but it's a joke. And the reason it was a funny joke is because nobody had negative feelings or a desire to blame Canada for anything, because they've been a very good customer of the United States. We've been a very big ally of the United States, fought alongside us in conflicts like Afghanistan and Iraq. This is so incredibly bizarre. And somebody else who's identified with the tariff policy of President Trump, which basically is to be unpredictable about your epic economy methods, to just be someone who the rest of the world will fear but won't take for granted or count on. A White House official, Peter Navarro, appeared on Real America's Voice with Steve Bannon, and he had his own harsh words for Canada and Canadians. This is clip 19.
And then politics took over, Steve. The politics of this are Mark Carney, the prime minister, come from behind victory, picked up more than 20 points in the last week or so when he started bashing Trump. Okay, so that's his playbook. And the Canadian people are kind of the useful idiots of that process, because they reward that rhetoric. The rhetoric is, oh, poor Canada, the U.S. is a bully, they're attacking our sovereignty.
Are we gonna back down? Okay, I got it, but you've got this tough tariff regime right now. Are we going to see this to its bitter end?
There's no back down. We are very disappointed. Okay, you know that word, Steve? That's the worst word in the president's handbook. It's like they retraded the deal at the end. We gave them a great deal. They retraded it, and they're dumping all over us. Laurel and Hardy. You got Mark Carney and Doug Ford, the guy who took too many hits playing hockey.
The guy who took too many hits playing hockey. Is this effective and persuasive to people who instinctively see that tariffs are bad for the economy? They're bad for your personal economy because you end up paying more to get the same stuff that you were getting before. It means it's because a tariff is a tax. And I think people have come to understand that finally in this country. Mark Short, who is a fine conservative, he was a chief aide for a while to Vice President Mike Pence. And he was on CNN giving his evaluation of Trump's tariff agenda, such as it is. This is clip 13.
I think that the biggest challenge is that I think the president's trade agenda is bonkers. And I think it's hurting a lot of Midwestern states that are reliably Republican, a lot of agricultural states. And at this point, it's hard to distance because they've allowed the executive branch to have the authority that belongs to Congress.
Okay. That idea, the idea that you might actually want to consult Congress before going forward with a unpredictable and very unstable tariff policy, that it seems to me is very appropriate. There's something else here that is extraordinary, is they were talking about using some federal control of tariffs that Trump was going to take under his wing, and that he was proud of the fact that this was authorized by the famous tariff bill of 1930, which was the Smoot-Hawley tariff, which brought on the Great Depression. If you read Milton Friedman or any other serious economist, they will say that the big increase in tariffs when we were right at the edge of depression is what helped to push us over into a real depression, the Great Depression, and that was the Smoot-Hawley tariff. And President Trump now is proud of the fact, and his spokespeople have said, well, this is the first time since 1930 when that right was authorized to the president to basically to judge among the countries of the earth who's going to have a high tariff and who's not going to have a high tariff. Okay, for any American president who knows history at all, an association with the Smoot-Hawley tariff is an association with the Hoover presidency in 1930. So this is probably not a great association to have. There's also, speaking of associations, RFK Jr. RFK Jr. was speaking to reporters, and he blamed the COVID lockdowns for what is happening with measles in our country right now. Is there really an association? We will get to that coming up next. We'll also get to some good news about a city in the country that has made huge progress in reducing its murder rate. How? We'll get to that and more coming up on the Medved Show.
Ding, 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 ding.
Get 50% off by becoming an annual MedHead member.
Nice.
Join at michaelmedved.com.
Real nice.
Ding, 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 ding.
And on the Michael Medved Show, there is a new theory about what is responsible for the measles outbreak here in the United States, which is devastating. It's unexpected. It is completely unnecessary. And it obviously goes fairly directly to the actions and attitudes of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., our National Secretary of Health and Human Services. And he was speaking to reporters, and he blamed the COVID lockdowns and the other means in which we eventually overcame the devastating COVID pandemic, that is somehow responsible for the measles outbreak, rather than blaming it properly on some of those vaccination alarmists and radicals who warned Americans and ordinary people away from common sense protections against not just measles, but measles, mumps, and rubella, the whole MMR consultation and combination. This is Robert F. Kennedy speaking to reporters yesterday, clip 16.
We're doing a better job than any country in the world at controlling the measles outbreak. This is a worldwide epidemic, and it's happening because of the lockdowns, because many kids did not get vaccinated during the lockdowns. Then you had a dramatic diminishment of public faith in the regulatory agencies during the COVID period because of government overreaching, because of the gaslighting and the manipulation. So even in my discussion with Governor Shapiro yesterday, and he said to me, well, we've seen this big drop in vaccination rates in the state from 97 to 92.3. He admitted on the phone that it all happened during the Biden administration. Since I've been in office, since President Trump's been in office, there's been a 0.1% diminishment. We are actually restoring faith in the public health agency, so people will take our advice. And our advice is that people should get the measles vaccination.
Okay, that kind of clarity has not been a characteristic of the RFK Jr. leadership of America's public health community. Meanwhile, questions about Trump's impact and the Trump tendency to blame any negative outbreak, on the Biden administration. And by the way, you just heard it there from RFK, when actually the response to the outbreak, the original outbreak of COVID, began under President Trump before President Biden came to power. And it makes it very difficult to blame Biden alone. Very, very MAGA conservative, rah-rah Trump run to the other side, to people who would like to see Trump at least impeached and removed from office, if they don't even wish worse on him, God forbid. Okay, but they do have a basically negative view in responding as callers to the leadership of President Trump on the issue of tariffs, one of his favorite obsessions.
Let's go straight to phones to Doug in Ohio. Independent line. Good morning, Doug.
I'm an American, hardworking, paying citizen, and the tariffs are going to kill the American worker. I can already tell. They're going to hurt our economy. And I feel the same way that the Doug in Canada feels about Donald Trump. He's about the biggest idiot ever made. And I just want you to know that, and I think that's just how I feel about it, because this trade war, we lost in Iran. We're going to lose this trade war. What is his problem? And he wants to build a gosh darn throne room. He calls it a ballroom, but it's his own throne room, and I don't like any of it from this man that we got as president. He's an idiot, and he's going to cause nothing but trouble.
Max in Tallahassee, Florida, Republican line. Good morning, Max.
I mean, right now, I think what we need to focus on primarily is Trump's tactics on trade now compared to his first term, where his aggressiveness seemed to kind of yield results, whereas now I think nobody really buys it anymore. I think everybody's just like, not going to really do anything. And frankly, I just find it all to be very disappointing that not even he seems to realize that. And he's just embarrassing himself.
What I like is the one who called in and said he's the biggest idiot ever made. Are idiots made, or are they born? That's the kind of obvious question you would ask in something like that. And if idiots are made, what were the key markers in that manufacture process which we can avoid? By the way, we were playing the Robert Kennedy saying that he had a meeting with Governor Shapiro, and Governor Shapiro blamed the Biden administration for all of the failures and disappointments and hardships of the pandemic. No. The truth is, fact check, right here in real time, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro did not blame the Biden administration. Instead, he blamed Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the Trump administration for worsening the measles outbreak. Robert F. Kennedy asserted that Shapiro admitted during a phone call that a drop in vaccination rates occurred under President Joe Biden, a point Kennedy has also posted on social media. Shapiro's response? Shapiro explicitly denied Kennedy's claim, calling it inaccurate and misleading. In other words, he's lying again. Shapiro's stance. Shapiro stated that Kennedy's own anti-vaccine rhetoric, efforts to undermine public health agencies, and spreading of misinformation are what directly contributed to falling immunization rates and the deadly measles outbreak in Pennsylvania. And And coming up, I thought we had heard the last of it about changing the name of Lake Ontario, but apparently not. This is a real issue and a real plan for the president. But speaking of bodies of water, Mark Short basically talks about, well, what president is doing handling the swamp.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the Democrats say they're not impeaching again, but if the base of the party, if they're doing investigations, it's in the base of the party hears it more and they want it. I do think there's a difference in the second term, and that I think that one of the rally cries that I heard again in 2016 and 2020 repeatedly that got the crowds most animated was a promise to drain the swamp. And I do think that in the second administration, the president's administration has made the swamp the family's personal hot tub. And I think that there's a far more corruption that's happened this go around. It makes them far more vulnerable to a lot of the investigations that they should be more concerned about than it seems like.
Okay, Mr. Trump's investment accounts have continued, this according to CBS, to purchase and sell stock holdings in oil and natural gas companies while the president oversees the U.S. war with Iran. That according to his financial disclosure filings through the second quarter of 2026. As the Iran war continues, paused for a ceasefire and then restarted, Mr. Trump has purchased and sold oil and gas stocks worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. That according to the most recently available data from the Office of Government Ethics. And that is a very serious matter. Mr. Trump has a vast portfolio with buildings in all 11 sectors, and a CBS News investigation showed that in the first 3 months of the year, his accounts executed about 3,600 stock or securities trades worth a total that ranged between $212 million and $695 million. Democrats on the Joint Economic Committee estimated this week that the president's holdings in oil and gas companies have jumped in value from a range of $13 million to $46 million at the start of the year to $561 million by mid-August. Filers are only required to report ranges. We will get to more about the trade war and how that's going. And yes, that war in Iran, which is also not settled yet. That and more about the destiny of this greatest nation on God's green earth.